what he didn't tell us was Prince Andrew was with them, escorting them down, which is again rare, because usually he'd send his footman down with, once, you know, the females left, they would come down on the run with a footman and he would show them out. But this time Prince Andrew was with them. So we all ran and hid because we didn't want him obviously asking why there's so many officers down in the side door. And what he did was, which is again even more strange, was he went out of the palace onto the road, onto Buckingham Gate, and stood on the side of the road with these two females and waited with no protection, which is unheard of. Waited with no protection for about 10 minutes until he saw a taxi, waved the taxi down, put them in it, and they went. So there was no opportunity for us to say hello and strike up a conversation with these two individuals. He waited until they were gone, and then he went back into his apartments. Now, that is unheard of, you know, and given what I know now about, you know, allegations of prostitutes in Thailand, 40 prostitutes and stuff like that, and other things that have come out in the book by Andrew, are based on the balance of probabilities. And bearing in mind, I used to work in that area, and I know the red light districts, obviously, as a police officer. They, now thinking about it, they were dressed as if like they were on the red light district, you know, down the Edgware Road. So I now, on the balance of probability, believe they were prostitutes, high-class prostitutes, which is a very sad thing, really, because he's disrespecting, you know, the Queen, you know, and the titles and all the rest of it. But now we know what a scumbag he is. Nothing surprises me.
Yeah, and then has the audacity to, as trade envoy, you know, use our tax money, fly over, you know, use those work trips to actually do nothing within his role that he should, but just spend our money while we're working
100%.
like donkeys, you know, trying to save up for Christmas all year. And he's behaving in this way. And I think what's really interesting is, for me, from a PR sense, very much how the palace or the elites and the palace have spun this is that, you know, Andrew's got fragile mental health. Virginia Giuffre is unreliable. Andrew has, you know, dedicated himself to his country. And we seem to be in a position where, you know, on the whole, when you challenge this narrative, you are now, they weaponize you with, you're trying to bring the monarchy down. It's like, no, I want to know what my tax money has been used for. And I also want to know, Paul, you know, what people like you, who are good, hardworking people, you've been put in very awful positions in the line of duty, which I think is grossly unfair by Andrew, you know?
I mean, to follow on the story, the information I gave in the interviews about we had to let unknown females into the palace, you know, we didn't know who they were, clear breach of security, because we do get, you know, mentally challenged people that turn, and I said this the other day to Shaun, they turn up at the front of the palace, so I'm here to see the Queen. You know, you're not, you know, they believe that they've got an invite to the Queen to have tea with the Queen, right?
Yeah.
So Andrew, this has only happened a few years ago. Andrew was at Windsor in his lodge, and a female turns up to the front of the lodge in a taxi, gets out, approaches the two royal protection officers and says, I'm Prince Andrew's fiance, and I'm here to see him. So if you've seen my other interviews, you know what the standard procedure was: let them in, otherwise we're going to get a tirade of abuse from Prince Andrew. So we would let them in because we know what was coming. We've already been abused by them and threatened by them if we dare to stop these individuals. So those two poor officers have done what we would have done, their counterparts in Buckingham Palace did, just let her in. I think one of them even paid her taxi fare, right? So she's gone in, wandering around his private lodge. He could have bumped into her at any time. Then they've realised that she's mentally challenged, that she's not his fiancée, and had to run, and luckily they detained her before, you know, they come across each other. But that was a massive security breach. She could have had a knife, a gun, or anything and killed him, you know. And the point being is those officers were not at fault, but they were, because, you know, they were coerced, and they were unduly coerced by threats and all the rest of it. They've broken the rules, technically, whichever way you look at it. You know, and I felt for those officers, and I come out publicly and defended them at the time. I said, listen, that's happened at Buckingham Palace. It's not those officers' fault, because they'll end up pounding the beat in Brixton the next day. So that's a clear issue. And also, he misused police officers, not only in that way, but I've said sometimes he would have his PPOs drive these unknown women home, you know, from Buckingham Palace. That is not a police officer's job. We're there to protect the royal family from threats and stop anyone from getting in. We're not there. We're not a taxi service to drive his bits of fluff home, as you want to call it. We're there for a job. So that's misuse of a police officer. And then picking up golf balls, for crying out loud. At one of his PPOs, I was at the garden. We've heard it so many times. And he's turned his protection officer, a highly trained officer, into a ball boy. I mean, come on. This is how he regards his people that are there to protect him, protect his life. So you can imagine how he treats other people. In fact, you've probably heard the story. The maid was called up 3 flights of stairs into his personal apartments just to shut his curtains, and he was sat right next to him. Right, all on record. This is. So we're getting a picture, and also all I've ever said. I just want people to know the kind of man he is. Because all we see is the ribbon cutting and the saluting and the flag. You know what I mean? When they're on doing these different openings and and all this. But when they're off duty, I've seen the real Andrew, and that everyone has. So all those years of me saying it and people doubting me, now it's come home to roost. And as far as I'm concerned, I've been vindicated. Everything I've said has come true, and he is a monster. And now people have seen it, and now we've seen the late reaction. It's too little, too late. I said on CNN the other day. He asked me about, did the king do the right thing? I said, I think it's too little, too late. To be fair, so we're going to see where this goes, but there's a lot more to come, and I think we're going to find out even more. How awful this man is, and I call him a man because he's not a prince. He's just Andrew Mountbatten Windsor now. And that's a better ring. That's a better ring. But I think the next title he'll probably get, hopefully, will be defendant. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean that would be amazing. How much did you see Ghislaine Maxwell when you were there?
Yeah, I saw her on a frequent basis. She was a regular visitor, and as I said, she had the run of the palace. So she would, in effect, was never stopped. She was a bit like part of the royal family. We'd see the car. It was a green Range Rover she had. Sometimes she'd be driven in it by a chauffeur. Sometimes she'd be driving it herself. As soon as we saw the car, we just let her in, and she'd go straight into the quad, into Andrew's, private apartments. And as I said, look, the picnic was started off when we saw him having this intimate picnic in the back garden, very lavish picnic. And then from there on, my attention was drawn to her. And then, as far as we were concerned, myself and my colleagues, they were in some form of intimate relationship, bearing in mind the amount of women we've been letting into this man, in for this man. And now all of a sudden he's got this, Maxwell was visiting him on a regular basis. So we just thought it was another one of his, conquests.
Define regular. How regular?
I'd say at least see her once a week. But don't forget, I was on different shifts. So other officers would have seen her as well. One of my colleagues told me, and this is from him, and I trust him. He had 30 years service, unblemished record. She came into the palace 4 times in one day.
Wow.
So yeah, she was a regular to the point where, as I said, we came to the conclusion, because she was in so regular, once, twice a week, whatever. If I was on an early son or a late son, I'd probably see her twice a week, say. And then so from that basis, she was just like, there was no one else had access. Let's put it this way: no one else had that kind of access. She didn't have any ID. Even household staff, even though they've been there years, would still have to present their ID to us. Wow. Yeah, but she would have access. She had no ID, but we would just have to let her in. So the rules were completely different for her. Completely.
I found recently some pictures of Ghislaine's father, Robert Maxwell, with the royals, and you just think it runs deep. Yeah. The story that's always spun is just utter rubbish. They think we are born yesterday. Yeah,
I mean, don't forget, that interview that Prince Andrew done all those years ago. They should have got a grip of it and said, listen, we need to do something now, but they didn't, because the Queen was still alive. I think they thought they could stay still. Well, they did have the power to pattern it out and calm it down, but obviously, like you said, I think we're peasants and we're stupid, and this is the problem they've got, because they live this life of luxury, and everywhere they go, someone's bowing and scraping and this, that, and the others, and and they think that we are just simple people, and that we should not have the cheek to question anything that they are involved in. Well, listen, I agree with what your family business is none of my business in terms of if you have a row with the Queen or whatever, your wife, that's none of our business. But when you're on the public payroll and then something's happening and then we find out you've been abusing your position in so many ways, then it is our business. Yeah. I mean, Prince Andrew used to use the Royal helicopter to go and play golf because we used to see him coming out in the garden with his golf bag, throw up his PPO, obviously carrying that, putting it in the helicopter and he'd fly off under the guise probably that he was doing something for the UK trade as UK trade envoy, but he was going to play golf in the Royal helicopter. What's that all about?
Paul, I'd like to introduce you to Paula M., our senior royal correspondent who's just joined us.
Hello, hi,
how are you
Paul.
doing?
I'm doing well,
Hello.
thank you. I've been watching your interviews, and there was one comment you said, I think it was in 60 Minutes, where you said they asked you if you would remember whether Virginia was there or not, and you said, well, something like at the moment probably we wouldn't because it was such a long time ago, and we were mostly focused on Andrew. Yeah. And it kind of brought it home for me how dispensable these people, not by you, but how dispensable these ladies were, that nobody would remember them. And this is the thing that a lot of the victims have to fight against. Because also you mentioned that and you guys are tough, a lot of the police protection officers don't want to come forward because they're scared of what's going to happen afterwards. So if this is you guys, that you are in the police who are scared of coming forward, how people don't understand how the victims feel. Yeah, it's worse.
It is, and it's I think that the victims in this case have been marginalised, not only by the press, by royal family, and also members of the government. They've been marginalised. Yeah, they should be the focus of everything about the Epstein scandal. They should be the focus. These are the people that have been damaged. Yeah, they've been abused, and as far as I'm concerned, you've got survivors, which are those people that have been abused, that managed to get their life back together and managed to get through life and have kids and have a sort of a semi-normal life. A victim of abuse is someone who doesn't get that chance, who isn't that strong, unfortunately, who turns to drugs, who turns to crime. And I've met them in jail. I've met them. They've told me their stories. And abuse, their childhood abuse, and has led to them, life of crime. And then there's unfortunately the victims who don't even make it that far and have to take their own lives. Unfortunately, I'm putting Virginia in that category, which is very sad to say. But it's as far as I'm concerned, the pressure that she was under, as you were saying about victims, is what I think drove her to take her own life. Unfortunately, and I said on CNN. That as far as I was concerned, that Virginia's death, although Epstein, Maxwell, and Prince Andrew weren't directly involved, with her death, they bought the ticket, because at the end of the day, you look at what the woman has gone through, and I know there's people taking her story to bits, and some of it might not add up and all the rest of it. But listen, she's a truth teller, all right, and whatever part of her story they don't think true is. Prince Andrew paid £12 million, yeah? And I believe that he did sleep with her, as far as I'm concerned, 100%. And when I did my interviews in 60 Minutes, I said that I only go by the facts, right? I'm not going to deviate and speculate. But given what's come out now in evidence in relation to the dishonesty of Prince Andrew and what he said, what has been found to be lies, complete lies, based on the probabilities, including testimonies entitled the book entitled by Andrew Lowry, I'm of the opinion that Prince Andrew did sleep with Virginia Giuffre, 100%.
I have to ask you something, because I saw your interviews, and a lot of times you were saying that, for example, you broke protocol or security breach or whatever by not including the name. So you really have no idea who was coming in or out, which is insane. Exactly. 2 questions. What would have happened if one of these people had harmed the Queen or any other people there? Because I assume that once they get in, they have free access to the rest of the place, number 1. And number 2, if you, as a police protection officer, had seen Andrew breaking the law, harming a girl, what would have been your reaction? Would you have been empowered to stop it, or just
100%?
The other way?
Yeah, 100%. Listen, as far as I'm concerned, our role when we join the police is to protect the public. All right. and that's the first and foremost. If I'm an old school police officer, so my remit was protect ordinary decent people and terrorise the criminals. Yeah, and so if we had seen Prince Andrew in any way, shape, or form abusing or assaulting a female, then he would have been dealt with the same as any other scumbag doing that. Yeah, I know the emphasis is on, look, would we have done anything? But I personally, and I know my colleagues would have done. I'm not saying that there were not police officers in that unit that may well have turned a blind eye, because there were officers in there that were loyal, were 100% loyal to the royal family. And I've got officers that have called me out for speaking out online, you know. And I've said, how can you defend the indefensible? You was a police officer, you know. All this nonsense about you signed an NDA. Listen, that went out the window as soon as I saw Andrew bullying staff, you know, and terrorising people. And you know, no, sorry, we've got to call it for what it is. The man's a bully. He's a deviant. He's a liar. All of it's been proved. All right. And so that's the first point. Although I've dealt with the second point first, now I'm going to go to the first point second. Right. So yeah, as you said, and I just gave an example about officers letting in a female who was mentally, you know, unstable. That could have ended up in exactly what you said. Someone could have got harmed because of Andrew was such a bully. And this is what I have to emphasize to people, right? They said, you should have done this, you should have done that. We made complaints, but no one was going to go to the commander because they would have just said, look, get lost. Yeah. So we did make complaints, but no one, the Queen, he was the Queen's favourite. So, you know, who's going to go to the Queen and say, you need to reel him in? Because she'll say, really? Off you go. That's the problem you had. It was a very archaic system. They had three canteens, restaurants in the palace. This is it's like upstairs, downstairs. When you join the Royal Protection Command, right, your remit now is sorry,
I am so glad it's not Siri.
Sorry,
I'm so glad it's not my dog this time.
my wife's gone out. She's left me with a moody 13-year-old daughter and 5 chihuahuas. So something was bound to go wrong.
No, I'm so glad it's you, not my dog this time.
They'll probably start yours off. I've lost my train of thought now. Where was I?
We're talking about damage. If somebody gets in the palace and then they have free access and something like that happens, like that mentally unstable lady.
Yeah, so basically, she got in, and then so that could have gone wrong for those officers. So at the end of the day, what we're saying is he's got us over a barrel. But that problem would have come back to the officers. But Andrew, I've said, I think I said it the other day. He's that type of man. He would ring up the commander, the Royal Protection Commander at home and verbally abuse him down the phone when we did something wrong. He didn't care who it was. You'll get a roasting. He would F and blind at you. It was, you know, so he was a bully from the top down. So it wasn't just like PCs or, you know, officers on the ground. He would bully the hierarchy of the Royal Protection Command. So there was nowhere really for anyone to go. You know, if you didn't like it, then go back to division. But it's a bubble. When you go in there, so this is my point before my dog started barking, you walk in there. So when I said to you, my priority is to protect the public, yeah, and prevent crime. When you go in through that doors into the Royal Protection Command, you're now going into a different world. Your remit now, and you will be told that, is to protect the Queen and the rest of the royal family. Your remit is not to be proactive in terms of looking for crime on the outside. You only deal with what is in this palace confines. Yeah, that is your loyalty now. So you're not loyal to the public as such in terms of you're not going to go out arresting people. Your focus is on protecting the royal family no matter what. Yeah. And I remember, I'll give an example. I first went on the unit and I've just fresh off the street, nicking robbers, rapists, bad guys. And I've turned up to this unit. So I've still got a sort of bug in me to, you know, being a police officer and proactive. And we were doing a armed mobile patrol around the palace and we spotted a car. And bear in mind, we're SO14 Royal Protection, and I spotted this car. And I put my blue lights on to stop him because he was acting suspiciously. It ended up in a chase, right, around Buckingham Gate, around the palace. He's gone for a set of red traffic lights and T-boned the car, smashed the car up. He tried to reverse into us before we had the chase. He tried to smash into our police car. Anyways, crashed the car. As he fell out the car, a massive knife has fell out with him. We was about to draw our weapons, but luckily we managed to get to him and restrain him before he could reach the knife. Otherwise, we would have probably shot him. So it was a good arrest. He turned out he'd stolen the car. He burgled a woman's house in Northampton up north. He'd stolen the car. He was on drugs, and he was wanted for various offences, and he'd come down to London to rob somewhere, rob a shop or something. So the next night, I'm on duty. The inspector calls me over and he says, Paul, he goes, if you want to do things like that, go back to division. Your remit is to protect the royal family, not to go and do things like that. So instead of a pat on the back, I got told, listen, if you do that again, you're off. Yeah. So that's the sort of.
So you are encouraged. You are encouraged not to protect the public. You literally are like private for the royal family. And
your priority is the royal family. They say, oh, you know, they say it publicly. Oh, if you see a crime committed, you can dive in. But privately, they're frowning. They're saying, don't do things like that.
I ask you because I'm here in Toronto right now, and I know that Andrew used to stay at a very nice hotel here, and there was an incident in 2013, September 2013, here in Toronto. I don't know if you're still with the Royal Police Protection Officers. No. And a lady, he was supposed to stay the whole weekend, but he ended up leaving earlier because there was an incident with a lady that was brought into the hotel that she had to be. She wasn't feeling well, and she left around 2 a.m, and they took her out, and it was hush hush, and he ended up leaving earlier. But that was covered up. I was surprised that that's not out in the public domain, and people are still scared to come out and talk about it. So in many ways, the police protection officers are covering up the crimes, and they're not reporting this.
Yeah, a lot of it, as I said, the coast protection officers are in a rock and a hard place with Prince Andrew because they're with him all the time. And as I've said to you, that the way he is, that's a really crap detail to get looking after him. You know, you're looking after a man-child at the end of the day, and so that's a pretty tough job. And you know, look, did they break the rules? You know, and look the other way. No, I don't believe they would have done if there was any sexual impropriety. They were professional officers, you know, at the end of the day. But did other things happen? You know, like. You know, they've obviously driven women home they shouldn't have done, and bits and pieces like that. Yeah, probably. As I said, listen, the royal household is a law unto itself, and you know, so if I'll give you an example. Actually, this is a good one. So in 2002, I think it was it the Royal Jubilee? I was there when they had the party at the palace, and you had all the rock stars there. I think Brian May was playing the guitar on the top of the palace and all that. And they had all the musicians at the back of the palace. The Bee Gees were there. You know, loads of you know, top drawer people, and they cordoned off with all like fencing the area where all the artists were within the palace. So us as police officers weren't able to get in there as such. We could patrol around, but the household told us just let them get on with it. Well, the amount of plumes of cannabis smoke coming from this tent, coming from this fenced off area was unreal. You know, we were getting high just smelling it. The amount, you know, it was so. We made complaints. We were told to ignore it. And a comedian, I'm not going to say his name, but there was a British comedian, and he was very famous at the time. And he was asked to come in to do a bit. He was part of it. He was involved in the celebrations, but he had to have checks done on him. So when you come in, you have to pass your details over. It turned out that he was wanted on warrant for non-payment of fines. Right. So he should technically have been arrested and taken to the local police station, and that's sorted out. But we were told by the household, don't do that, that's embarrassing. So he was quietly spoken to and told to go away and sort the matter out and come back, which is what he did. Oh, wow. So when we're talking about, you know, one rule for them and another rule for us, that was a sheer, you know, officers had to turn a blind eye for that, as well as the drugs. If that was out on the street, we'd be getting the big red key and putting the door in and finding where the drugs were, you know. But because we're in the palace confines, those sort of things we just have to let go. So yeah, you know, it was an unhealthy sort of place. When we look at it, you know, sexual impropriety by other senior members of the royal household. I'll give you a few examples. Don't know if you've heard them, but I'll tell you again. One of the Queen's senior advisors. We were on night duty at the front of the palace one night. He comes along drunk. He'd been out for the night. He comes up, he goes, I've just been assaulted and my briefcase has been kept in the club down the road, and you will go and get it. That's how he spoke to us, like shit, pardon my French. You will go and get it. So we went, no, we won't. So obviously he was clearly worse for the wear for drink. said, no, we won't be going anywhere. He goes, yes, you will, because I said, listen, we won't be going, now go home, sod off. So anyway, he kept making a nuisance of himself. So we called the inspector up, and the inspector came out and obviously recognised who he was, one of the Queen's personal advisors, and basically said to us, what had happened is he got himself into a lap dancing club off of Piccadilly somewhere, and he touched one of the waitresses inappropriately, and the bouncers had given him a slap and thrown him out, and rightly so, you know. And but what had happened is they'd thrown him out, but he didn't get his briefcase back. And what happened was the inspector said, well, the problem we've got is he's now telling me there's secret palace papers in this briefcase. So now once he said that, we're stuffed. We've had to go and retrieve this briefcase from this club. And we spoke to the bouncers and said, like, what's happened? And they told us, like, he touched one of the waitresses, sexually assaulted her. So I said, well, do you want to make a complaint? He went, no, we get it all the time. Unfortunately, sad to say, he said, we'll get it all the time. So that could have been an issue there. So we retrieved the briefcase and took it back, and no more was said about it. So that's one incident. Another senior, and this, you know, he must have been in his late 40s, yeah, this fella. And so he's hanging around those sorts of clubs. He wasn't a youngster, you know, finding his feet in the world. He was meant to be someone as senior official, and he's doing that sort of stuff. The next one was a colonel, retired. I'm not going to mention him, but he was one of the Queen's, again, personal advisors. And he had his wife and he had 2.4 kids, you know, and he'd have the country pub. He had a grace and favour apartment at St James's Palace, where the King now lives. But he was one of the Queen's personal secretaries, again, advisors. And so he's got his wife and his kids over at St James's. And like I said, at the weekend, they'll go down to their mansion and he'll go shooting and all the gentry stuff, colonel, this, that, and the others. But what we found out was, or what happened was, he was having an affair with a young staff member who was about 22. And he's got to be in his 50s, right? And it all come on top. The Queen found out, and she, as punishment, she held his knighthood back for a year, right? And so, you know, there has been other sexual impropriety within the. So when you think about it, you've got these type of sleazebags wrapped around the Queen, and then who's gonna say anything about Prince Andrew? Because it's only going to go to them, you know. Yeah. So. It's a strange place, and I've always said, you know, it's not normal life in there. It's a weird setup. It's a weird setup. People will never understand it. They will never understand it. It's a
rarefied environment. I have worked with royal households. I used to actually organize the security part, and I wanted to ask you about this on the security part, because one of my remits, one of my jobs I had, basically when royals had to go abroad from different households, not the British.
Yeah.
We would vet things. We would vet people in advance. This is why, for example, that idiot Harry doesn't understand that he has to give notice in advance, because there's a lot of things that are in place. It's not he's just going to pitch up to the place, you know.
Yeah.
Especially abroad. You were given an interview, and you were when Andrew, for example, went to see Epstein in New York after he had been convicted, and the same thing for Fergie, because Fergie took the girls, or the women, her daughters, to see them. I am surprised, because I saw in that interview that you said that he would have been flagged, rightly so. And other members, for example, of other royal households that I work with would have never gone there. And the government themselves would have not allowed it to go there. But why was he allowed, in spite of the fact that it was flagged? Where was the government holding the reins, or saying, no, you can't do this? Because at the end of the day, the monarchy represents it's an institution. So the current royals holding the titles are soiling basically the institution. Where was the government saying you can't do that?
No, 100% you're right. I mean, look, it would have been flagged up. The checks would have been done on Epstein's premises. Like I've said, I'll quickly go through it again. So we've got a foreign and domestic travel office within the Royal Protection Command. They deal, as you said, with any movements, both private and official engagements. They will then obviously liaise with the local police forces in this country or abroad, wherever these roles are going, whether it's private, as I say, or official engagement. So they would have obviously had to give. He's a senior member of the royal household, so he's not going to fly off and disappear. No one's going to know where he is. So it's all, like you said, it's going to be processed and it's going to be looked at and it's threat assessed, right? So Andrew would have had to give the details of Epstein's premises and who he was going there with, and obviously the checks would have been done with their counterparts in the US, and it would have flagged up these premises in case it's Russian owned or Chinese owned or something like that, and it could be a problem. And it comes back to a convicted felon, Epstein. So that information, if it was not already known by command, would now be in our possession. And then obviously the next conversation with Prince Andrew is this is not a good idea to be staying with a convicted felon. It could be a potential security risk, but obviously what they'll be looking at as well whilst over there, where the nearest hospital is, where the nearest police station is, and all those things. So it's a very detailed thing. So when it's moved, it's all organised. So that would be the main thing, is the security surrounding where he's staying. Yeah. So yeah, you're right, because I think the security services, I think in this Epstein madness, has got questions to answer. I mean, what did they know? When did they know it? Why did, as you said, you said the government technically probably wouldn't have been aware of Andrew's visit at the time. But don't forget, Peter Mandelson was at the heart of the government as well, and he was best friends with Epstein. Yeah. So he was another one caught with his pants down, literally, because obviously the emails exploded and he suddenly rolled out the woodwork,
so, just to make a break, because I'll forget. You said that the government would have not known, but wouldn't the security? This is one thing. Wouldn't the police protection officers would have notified their superiors that Andrew was lying over, and the government, and then there's somebody in government must have known, because you have police protection officers funded by the taxpayers that are going over there, and they have to know. Somebody had to be informed, and they allowed this to happen. I mean,
no, you're 100% right. So I think obviously the British embassy in America, the consulate, would have been made aware that Prince Andrew's coming over for a trip. Now, what the thing is, the discussion would have been, so the checks would have come back, a report would have been compiled for this trip, and obviously they would have flagged up any threats, any issues that could potentially arise on this trip, right? Obviously, front and centre, Epstein, convicted felon, right? So that information being passed to the commander of Royal Protection and said, look, there's a problem here. And then there probably would have been a meeting with Prince Andrew, high-level meeting, and probably one of the members of the senior household potentially. And Andrew said, well, I'm going. He's overridden it. There's no other way around it. He's overridden it, because if someone had told me he wasn't going, for example, if the Queen had known or whatever, she probably would have said, no, you're not going. Obviously, within the government, like you said, the embassy, the consulate would have known. Would they have got the report? Probably. Would they have made their obviously they've made it known what they thought? Yes. What did Andrew think? Didn't care. Hence why the visit happened. It's again, we come back to, I went there to say goodbye to him, the honourable thing to do, right? Well, we now know that's a lie. He's gone over there because it's all coming on top, and he thinks he's going to be in the frame. Something he's done is might come to light, and he's gone over to Epstein to see, what the actual score is and how deep he's in the pub. That's what he's done. You don't go to visit a convicted. You don't risk, the kind of damage that he's caused in the position that he's in as a senior member of the Royal for nothing. Yeah, it must have been a very, very serious conversation he needed to have with Epstein for him to risk the reputational damage that's happened on that visit with those photos. It's clear. And as we've seen now with the evidence that's coming to light, something very, very wrong has happened with Epstein in the relationship with Epstein. What's gone on, we don't fully know yet. But whatever it is very serious indeed. So hopefully, more will come out. But for that, as you said, there are going to be people in the government within the security service, I suggest, that would have known what's gone on, and there must have been reports, because he was trade envoy, UK trade envoy, A, and B, he was a senior member of the Royal household, so he could have been subject to blackmail, threats, kidnaps. So there must have been a constant stream of intelligence around him, and not only his business activities, but his personal activities, to make sure that he's not getting himself involved with anyone who could compromise him and the state. Yeah. But then, unfortunately, what we've also got is the Chinese connection, and that was flagged up far too late by the intelligence services. So what were they doing? Were they sitting on their hands? So I think that the intelligence services, MI5 and MI6, are going to have questions to answer. If it comes to a public inquiry, I'm pretty sure they're going to be in hot water as well. So yeah, there's a lot of strands to this. There's a lot of people going to be affected, and I think that's why I think they're going to try and minimise the damage, throw Andrew to the wolves, and hopefully close that down. But will that happen? Potentially, because there's a lot of people that could be damaged with this. It's serious.
Paul, I've just got two questions before I go, because I've got to sort my kids out. But I'm dying to know, Freemasonry, I know this is a bit off topic, but we know the royals have a long history with Freemasonry. Did you see anything regarding that behind palace walls? Because it's my belief that Freemasons have frequently stood in the way of justice and for victims, and also have infiltrated so many different organizations like the police. And I think it's a real concern. So I wondered, did you see anything relating to the royals and Freemasons?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because it's not off topic. It's actually bang on topic. I've mentioned that in interviews and they've been cut. The connection with the Freemasons within the police and close relationship with the Masonic Lodge in the royal household. And the interviews that I've done, they've edited them out, right? It is a very pertinent topic, which and I believe it is part of the problem. Okay, so when I went to Royal Protection, I was brought in there through the Masonic, for people that were on the Masonic Lodge, were in the lodge, yeah. So I got in. I was given all the answers to the questions that I was going to be asked on my interview. I was given the pictures of the roles that I was going to be asked to identify before the interview. So the civilians that were on my interview board didn't realise that the officers, the sergeants, had already given me all the answers to the questions. So I went in and I passed with flying colours. Yeah, they probably thought I was a stalker. But the point being is that a police officer, if you're a Mason in the Masonic Lodge in the Royal Protection Command, you're probably earning £20,000-30,000 more than an officer that isn't. You get all the plum jobs. You get to go to Scotland where the money is. You get courses. And a lot of the 14-2 officers would have been Masons. If they weren't Masons when they went on that, they would have been brought into the Masonic Lodge. Yeah. Now that is closely linked to the Royal Household Masonic Lodge. And what happens is a lot of them, when they retire one day from the Royal Protection Command, they immediately take up a post in a civilian role in the Royal Household. Yeah. Some people say, well, yeah, that's because, they've been there years, they're trusted police officers. No, hang on a minute. They should go through the same process in interviews like everyone else that is outside of the palace. There might be other people that have got much more skills and bringing to the table than that police officer. But because he is attributed to the Masonic influence, the Masonic Lodge, he's now got an upper hand. Now, this is how serious it is within the Metropolitan Police. Years ago, I've put this on my Twitter account. I was told, I got a call saying, listen, they're so worried about the Masonic influence within the Metropolitan Police that they've initiated a grass line, an informants line. So if anyone's concerned that fellow colleagues are Masons, they could make the call to the Anti-Corruption Command and throw them under a bus and put their name in the loop, because the Met were worried about the influence that the Masonic Lodge has within the police for the leg up and getting jobs and this, that, and others. So you're bang on the money there. Also, what I will say, and I'm not accusing Lord Loughborough of being a Mason, but he's a titled Lord, and he was my commander at the relevant period. And a classic example was he retired one day as commander of the Royal Protection Command. Bearing in mind it was during the time when all this has happened with Andrew. He then became master of the household for the King the next day, where he's still now. So that's again connection. Also, the Duke of Kent, I believe, is a Grand Master in the Masonic Lodge as well. So just to give you a bit of background, even the roles are in the Masons. So
do you believe that Masonry goes right up to the top to Charles and is heavily down through Andrew, William? Yeah.
Listen, this is a historical sort of association, isn't it? Yeah, and it's got royal connections. So anyone who is part of that establishment, the Masonic establishment, are going to be loyal to fellow Masons, and especially within the Royal Household Masonic Lodge. It's a very, very influential organisation. And don't forget, as you know, as press people yourself, that you'll get people that used to work with, or there's press people that were on the other side of the fence suddenly join the press liaison for the palace, become press secretaries. When they were out, they were on newspapers, and now they're press, so they know all the tricks of the trade. So they will cherry pick people from the opposite side of the fence to come and work for them, because then they know all the tricks of the trade that they can then use back. Yeah, in terms of fighting a shitty story, pardon my French, a shitty story, or something that they need to dilute down in, so it's not as much of an impact on the royal family than it first did. Yeah, so there's a lot of there's a lot of history and a lot of secrecy behind this organisation, but I've seen firsthand that it is a corrupt organisation in terms of when I was there as part of the police. I was asked to join it, I didn't, but as I said, officers were given exponential treatment if they were part of that unit. We saw that for ourselves, and I'm not the only one saying it. My colleagues said it, say it as well. You know, so yeah, I do believe that Masonic influence could well have played a part in what's gone on, and in terms of the covering up of evidence and stalling in terms of getting justice done for everyone.